Hello and welcome to Talking with Famous
Do
People.
you want me to just begin?
Hello and welcome
All
to
right.
talk. Hello and welcome to Talking with Famous People. I'm host Eric, and this is a go-to meeting with several people, two of whom are here, and one of whom is momentarily not here apparently. One of whom is Tiffany, whom we met yesterday during a marathon day of Talking with Famous People sessions. The other of whom is Greyel, who was speaking successfully. I was hearing her for a second, but then I don't hear her anymore. Hopefully, she gets that figured out. I have asked Tiffany a question, and she's going to answer it right now. The question was about NI, introverted intuition, and the perspective on that. So please go ahead.
So I was gonna first say that was like my weakest and least developed trait, and if anything, it actually kind of gets me into trouble. And if I'm understanding everything correctly, um, my nature is to never let things go, and that when there's a problem, when there's something wrong, I'm always trying to fix it. I can never kind of just sit and rest and let things be and let a natural resolution arrive when that's appropriate. It's great when I need to be troubleshooting something or I need to be the hero, but when I need to just be the person that's kind of there listening to the situation or observing or waiting, I just can't sit still with myself. And I feel like if I were developing that trait and I were using it to my, if I were able to develop it and use it to my advantages, I would be able to determine which situations were the ones that required my kind of all over the place, batter it till it's fixed kind of attitude and way of thinking, versus when it's appropriate for me to just kind of sit back and wait for that right answer.
So you'd like to be able to better identify uh, bad paths. Okay, Grail, let's. I forgot to start the timer on this one, but let me go, Grail. I'm going to do the timing process from this point forward. So, I asked you a question about TE. Are you there, Grail?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello?
I can hear
Okay,
you. I can hear you.
great.
But what I would appreciate is if you would turn off your speakers and put on headphones. Would help with the echoing.
Oh, sorry, but I did that already.
Oh, never mind. You got it. It's good now. That was probably something else. My mistake.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
so I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock. Welcome to Talking with People and straight under the gun. Are you ready to go? And you can read your TE answer or say whatever you wish to say about that. I asked her the question to please explain to me. I don't know what type she is or anything, but I feel as one of my least understood things is TE. I don't quite understand how that feels or what it, how it feels different than TI, how it's differentiated. So I asked her to explain it, and 1 minute starts now.
Well, for me, I find that TE definitely gets the job done. It's all about execution. So that means going to people that know what they're talking about, so experts. Um, Basically, you're making a lot of assumptions about what is truth and what gets the job done. And that tends to be a little bit annoying for me because a lot of TE types will say, this is the truth. And it sounds like they're making a definitive argument on something being the truth, when in reality, it's just their opinion. And it just comes out as if they know exactly what they're talking about. And once you start to break down, exactly what they're talking about, that's when oh, okay. That's when you realize that they don't always know what they're talking about, but the point is that they'll get the job done. They'll always have a result to show, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know entirely what is true. So that's something
Okay, boom. All right, so I'm impressed with your clock management there. Um, I haven't asked you anything at all about yourself. I don't know a single thing about you. I know you said you commented before, but is it I think I have a picture of who you might be, but as far as a commenter, it's like a cat, a gray cat or something in my head. But I could be wrong entirely, so I don't really know anything about you. I'm gonna type you at some point though. But let's ask the next question, Tiffany. I would like to ask you about the question I was going to ask Zachary, who's no longer here, which is about SI. SI is the fourth function for the ENTP, the inferior function, and this is one example of it back here. I would like to hear how SI manifests for you or any thoughts you have about it or what it is or anything like that. Time starts
Give me a
now.
little bit more information about the guy.
I'm talking about SI.
Yeah,
SI.
could you give me a little bit more information about that?
Okay, it's introverted sensing. I tend to think of it as introverted sensing has two ways it expresses itself. It expresses itself externally, which is ordering your stuff, like keeping your shelves neat and tidy. It expresses itself internally in terms of keeping your schedule, being on top of paying your bills, stuff like that.
Okay, there's only really one area of my life that it manifests itself right now.
Okay, well, hold on. Yeah, I didn't start time yet. Okay. Why was I able to get it before where you could see what it said? Now I can't get it anymore. All right, well, whatever. Start time. Go.
Okay, so the only thing that really kind of manifests itself for me is at my new job. I have a cubicle. It's not a traditional cubicle, really. I mean, our office doesn't have traditional cubicles, but it's a cubicle nonetheless. And I've got, my drawers, and I've got my nice computer workstation with 3 monitors, and I just have a ton of stuff, and it's so meticulously, neatly organized. And I have my whiteboard, and I have, all these different shortcuts I've set up on my workstation, all labeled out, even though I'm probably never going to forget them. And it's just all this really neat, not me kind of environment. Like everywhere else that I inhabit, unless I just cleaned up, is a pigsty. Am I out of time?
Got 12 seconds left. 11, 10.
Okay, so that's a very undeveloped thing for me. I realize it's a value. I'm much more able to function productively at work, but I don't do it anywhere else in my life.
Piao, time. All right. Next, let's talk to Greyel. If I were to ask, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Okay. If I were to ask you, what cognitive function question would you be most interested? What cognitive function would you be most interested in being asked a question about, and why? What would your answer be? 1 minute. Time starts now.
I want to say introverted feeling, because that's the one that I've been being tripped up with. I'm not entirely sure if I prefer introverted feeling or not, and that's why I can't be entirely sure that I'm an INTP or an ENTP versus ENFP or an INFP. And I think being forced to identify it maybe would force me to understand certain inconsistencies or consistencies that would help me realize whether I am one or the other, I guess. Or even, if I'm an INTJ or an ENTJ or something like that, I don't know. So probably I would say I have a pretty decent understanding of all the other functions, but the introverted feeling one really seems to trip me up, and I think maybe just being forced to answer a question on it could clear it up.
Do you feel antagonistic towards it? Introverted feeling?
Not really. I mean, I have a lot of INFP friends. My time's over.
Go ahead. It's fine.
I mean, I have several INFP friends and ENFP friends, and I really like them. I do have a problem with my INTJ friend using introverted feeling. I could clearly see her being stubborn on certain things, and I have trouble, trying to understand it. But other than that, I mean, with those who use introverted feeling in the first or second function, I generally don't have any problem with them. So I wonder if it's just how they're being used.
Do you think that an introverted feeler is more likely to be stubborn about a position of argumentation than an extroverted feeler?
Depends on what the argument is.
Any thoughts, Stephanie?
Well, I keep getting hung up on something that Greyel said actually before you even asked this question. I can't stop thinking about it. I don't really want to interject this. I don't want to take us off topic.
Go ahead.
Okay. Greyel, you mentioned earlier something along the lines of, and I believe you were talking about yourself, involving surrounding yourself with capable and smart people, and to fill in the gaps where maybe you weren't. Did I mishear or misunderstand what you were talking about previously?
No, you didn't.
And I just got hung up on that because it reminds me of the way that my mother thinks. and it just sounded like her when you were talking, and she is an ENTJ all the way.
Well,
And
I
I don't
mean,
know if that's relative or not, but I just noticed it, and
I
just
feel
I
the
could
same
not let it
way.
go. I had to say that.
The thing, I don't know if that's necessarily an ENTJ thing exclusively, because I think I feel the same way, that any organization is going to necessarily be as successful as its component agents are have spiritual ownership of what they're doing. You know, if they do, and it's real, then good stuff happens. If it's coerced, then it's always slightly less good, even if it's minor coercion.
Well, if I may just kind of clarify on that, is it all right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
My brother actually tested and typed. He's a pretty much a clear-cut ENTJ. And what I meant by being surrounded by capable people is, first of all, I think a lot of ENTJ types like to be in a position of power. But
Oh yeah.
I think, and TE is mostly a delegating function. So not necessarily, I guess, since I was pressed for time earlier, but because I think like because TE is a delegating function, he just knows what person to go to for what. I need to, like, that's what I mean by surrounding themselves with experts. So the other day he was
Yeah,
asking
that's
me,
great.
hey, I know you're good at this. I know I need this for my group, and you're the best person at this that I know. So can you help me with it? And I said, yeah, sure, that's not a problem. And then he would provide me with all the, because he didn't want me to spend too much time on it. He basically gave me all the tools I needed and said, I don't need you to spend more than an hour on this, but I know you'll do a good job. So I probably shouldn't be asking you because you're so busy, but please. And so I said, okay, that's fine. And I think he does that with everybody else. So naturally, I think ENTJ types kind of end up in a group of like trusted individuals that they will always go to for certain things. And I see that with my INTJ friend as well, but not to the same extent, because I think, well, because extroverted versus introverted, I think that plays into it. So that's what I mean by delegation in the sense of TE, is knowing who to go to for what, and essentially making them do the work. So
That
I don't
sounds
know.
just right. That sounds perfect. That sounds just how I'm picturing it in my head.
I'm curious. I think that these things, what you're describing there, is going to manifest very differently depending on what level of hierarchy you're at. So, as I know, I behaved very differently when I was a teacher to when I was a coach to when I was a director to when I was an owner. In each of those capacities, I have to behave differently. I'm noticing myself using TE, but I use it very badly. I mean, I use it badly when I have to use it for sustained projects. I can make the protocols and stuff. If I can make a concrete time object that establishes these protocols and can resist the urge to constantly change them, then then I can get some things done. But like right now, I delegate a bunch of tasks to Abraham. If I had good TE, I would be good about doing the follow-up stuff. Like, I'd be good about being responsive to him when he's calling me with questions to clarify things that I want him to do, and I'm in the middle of making a video. I just don't answer the phone. I'm like, well, I'm in the middle of this. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I'm kind of enslaved by my NE, I guess. But regardless, TE interests me because I have a history of using it well. When I was in a director position, I used it a lot more effectively than I do now in an ownership position, actually, because of the reason was I was tasked with making the protocols into time objects on a certain schedule, and I need that external discipline to really be effective, unless I'm just doing it for my own enjoyment. If it's really just exactly the same thing as playing, then fine, then I can do it. So my initial read on you, Greyel, is ENTP is my initial read, but I want to hear more about you. I had the pleasure of meeting Tiffany yesterday, and I've never talked to you before, so I would like to know more about your personality. What can you tell us about your own thoughts? You said you were conflicted between this type, that type, the other. What is it that makes you unsure?
Oh, well, first of all, because I'm very good at figuring out how to mess with the tests and get whatever result I want. So I obviously can't trust the tests. And I guess the biggest problem I have is, I guess the biggest problem is whether, because I mean, I listen to you and I think Zach talk on these videos, and I can't help but think, my introverted thinking, if I do use it, doesn't seem very developed. I can follow along perfectly well, and I mean, I can also help, sort of understand, but I wonder if that's due to age and education, as opposed to, say, my natural way of functioning.
Uh,
And being female, I'm also, a little more in tune with emotions. And so that doesn't help as to whether I prefer extroverted feeling or introverted feeling, or at what level actually
how
prefer them.
old are you?
Oh, I'm 30.
Okay, and what you said level of education? Because I'm not. I only have I have a bachelor's degree, and
Mhm.
some I don't think education. I don't value education very much. Most people value it more than I do. But I understand that I've been told on many occasions before that this is demonstrative of privilege on my part. Uh, what are your thoughts on education?
Well,
Can
I
I ask
can't.
her
I
one
don't.
question about what real quick?
No, I want to hear this first, and then we'll get to your question. Okay, hold on a second. Go ahead, Greyel.
Well, I mean, I definitely value education in the sense that, it does open you up to a lot of new horizons you may not have gone to before. I come from, like, I have a Juris Doctorate, so I have a professional degree. It's pretty, I guess, I spent a lot of money on education, so I can't be like, well, education sucks because I spent a lot of my time on it. But at the same time, I do think that there are limitations to it, and so I'm a little split on education. But at the same time, I also understand that this is a privilege that I was able to experience because of where I'm living at, so I can't, knock
Well,
it.
I know what a doctorate is. What's a Juris Doctorate?
Basically, it's a professional degree, like a MD for medical, for doctors. It's JD is for lawyers.
Oh, you're a lawyer or a doctor?
Yes,
Oh, you're a
I,
lawyer.
I'm a lawyer.
Oh, cool. Um,
Eh.
what kind of law are you doing?
Right now I'm in securities.
Securities, huh?
Yeah.
So I mean, are there a lot of basically you're dealing with a bunch of federal regulations about securities or what?
Yeah, essentially that.
Do you see? You see? Do you see? Do you see what I'm saying about the federal government getting involved in everything? Now, look, I understand with some of the security trading stuff that there's a certain need for it um,
Because
because
you want to prevent another Great Depression.
well, because it's not real work, it's
Yeah.
speculation. It's a bunch of fucking speculation, and so you got to police that shit because that threatens the free market. But the thing is, it really doesn't as long as it's really clear to everybody that it's speculation going in, and as long as we can, if I think that there's enough diversity of information in society now that people are there's not going to be that last housing bubble, for example. It was I Corey and I were watching that thing a mile away and going, oh my fucking god, I cannot believe people are still buying houses. This is insane. It was obvious. It's going to be a lot more obvious as information becomes more fluid. People aren't going to do stupid shit like that anymore. I don't think we need the federal government involved as
Well,
much as much.
I mean, I agree. I do see a lot of red tape, and I think, oh, God, this is so redundant. I mean, do people really need all this information? But then you actually see those prospectuses and actual documents that these companies are required to give out. And the average person doesn't have time to go through like 500, 600 page worth of information and actually, gain anything from it. Or, I think they should spend the time because it is their money, but there's always an argument against it. And I think the federal government sort of does the work for them in that aspect.
Well, I think to the extent the federal government was going to do the work, it should do work to enable the individual investor to create equivalent investments for themselves rather than participating in pre-made products.
And I mean, the government does not do anything like that, encourage them to do that. But I think there are now services being available to people from the private sector that essentially does that.
Yeah, I know, but that's the thing. It's like the federal government taking the wrong approach, in my opinion. Instead of regulating those things, they should enable more free market solutions. Like, oh well, if these guys are going to try to exploit it, let's try to get everybody to exploit that loophole, and that way, that loophole will naturally fizzle into nothing.
Yeah, but the government works in a way to block up that hole rather than to allow everybody to manipulate it. I think that's also a TE thing. When I talk to my INTJ friend, she's also, I think the TE, because I think you can't talk about functions like that because TE is always linked up with FI, right? The FI, the internal values, what is right and what is just, and all of those concepts in an internal aspect. And I think that fuels the TE in government. And essentially, they're saying, we need to block this up to make everything more equal across the playing field rather than allow everybody else to exploit that, because that should be illegal. We shouldn't let that kind of unfair advantage happen. Like, I think that's the argument they usually make.
I know, but they're using the wrong control mechanism. In other words, they're using a control mechanism rather than utilizing the existing force vectors as they naturally occur in the economy. And there are plenty now. There are enough tools with the internet now. The ecosystem is enabled to defend itself, and it wasn't before. So there was some justification for government before, and there's not the justification for it anymore. I don't think. Now, granted, there are large-scale economic swindler types, but don't you want to be in criminal law though?
Yeah, the criminal law is definitely a little more interesting. I thought about it. I may go into it later. I'm trying to, I think. But at the same time, I think the war on drugs is so ridiculous, I just can't. I don't know.
Do you want to talk to me about my plan to go fight my parking ticket? I want to throw a bunch of fucking motions at him. I want to, drown the court in motions.
Oh, God. That sounds very fun.
Doesn't it?
No, you're still here.
Hey. Is that Tiffany? Sorry, I didn't get back to your question there. I want to talk to Greyel more about lawyer stuff, but Tiffany, let's get back on topic a little bit and have you talk to her about your question, whatever your question was. Hello?
Nope.
Hello.
Oh, we're all back.
Okay, so can you ask your question?
Oh, sure. When she was talking about the test, she said that she couldn't trust it because she was able to manipulate it and get whatever results she wanted, and I'd like to say that I probably could do that as well, but chose not to. I'm wondering if she feels incapable of just answering the questions honestly.
That's an interesting question. Lots of framework assumed. Let's see what she has to say about it.
Oh yeah, I'm just curious. I just want to know more about that statement she made.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Nope, I'm not criticizing the question. That's an interesting question. Greyel?
Yeah, I'm not criticizing either. Initially, I started off with a pretty honest, approach to it. I accepted, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I read the questions with the understanding that I had, and what I found was that depending on the test, my results differed. And so I started to question the tests themselves on how accurate they are. I mean, on the internet they say, hey, tests are not accurate, but I wanted to know how inaccurate were they, and where could I trust these test results, or do I have to test? Essentially what I was doing was testing the test itself to see if I could find some sort of consistency to go with, and that's essentially when I realized, hey, I could really answer this whichever way I wanted, and I was in some aspect honest in all areas, say, because and it just depends on, I guess, what time I chose, and maybe sometimes misunderstanding it. But for the most part, it was because I was testing it,
That time
testing the
thing you're
test.
talking about, what time it is matters a great deal. Because the reality is, the idea of cognitive functions is the notion that anytime we're interacting with the world, we must be interacting with it through some sort of perspective. And when we try to think of all the different ways in which we can think about the world or approach it or feel about it or whatever, be a existent being in it, then it breaks down into 8 specific functions. It breaks
Right.
down into introvert feeling, those 8. And so the I think when you approach trying to figure out how you interact with the world, it's a matter of what proportions do you use things. I would say I
Mhm.
use my theory, or my little hypothesis, not theory exactly. It's just my sentence that I said is that that it's 8, 4, 2, 1. So I use extroverted intuition 8 times as much as, and then TI, introverted thinking, 4 times, then FE 2 times, and SI 1 time, which is why I've got a big mess. Except the thing I would stress here is that your perceiving functions are, especially the extroverted one, any for me is not something as my dominant function that I do 8 times or whatever. It's more like I filter things through that priority 8 times
Mhm.
as much as I filter things through through an accuracy priority, as much as I filter things through other people's feelings priority is third, and that's how I filter things in terms of understanding. However, it should also be stressed that sometimes I can use extroverted intuition like a doing function when I express my TI or FE in disruptive ways. So if in fact I go into a situation and I express some idea that challenges everything that's in the status quo in front of me, like all of your ideas are garbage and here's what I think, which sometimes as an ENTP you do that, you're 5 minutes into a room before you realize what you've done. You're like, oh my god. But that's my take on it. That does this resonate with you? If it does, then you're probably ENTP. If it doesn't, then you might look more towards INTP because they lead with TI. They're much more thoughtful. It depends how disruptive you feel naturally you want. How annoyed are you by being constrained?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's why I initially at one point tested as an ENTP, but I just couldn't agree with the inferior introverted sensing. The reason that I'm currently sort of on the path that I may be an INTP is simply because I think extroverted feeling is something that I've had to deal with, like struggled with a lot. And when you're a female, it's incredibly stressful to lack extroverted feeling, to lack the use of that function for that much. Um,
People expect you
so
to bring the nurture.
yes, they do, and they expect you to sort of know what you're doing in a social situation, and read the cue. So I think my extroverted feeling has been maybe overextended, and that's why, I've definitely forced myself to be very extroverted at one point.
Okay, Grail,
And
I'm your friend Sarah. Okay, Grail, hi, it's me, Sarah. Listen, Tom left me. He left me. I think this time it's for good. I know he's left before multiple times, but this time I'm really concerned about it. And what should I do? What? Just tell me. What should I do?
why did they get back together?
What? What?
What
I didn't
I,
hear you. I didn't understand you.
I would.
Boo!
Oh God, this is really stressful.
What should I do, Grail? Oh my goodness, I'm so sad. Boo hoo.
This has happened to me before,
Yeah, I bet.
where girls are like, "Well, I still love him," and I'm just like, "He's a douchebag. You need to leave him and just forget it. Go find another guy."
But I'll feel bad inside. Is that what they tell
Oh.
you?
No, they'll be like, "But I just can't let go of my feelings," and I'm just like, Yes, but it's clearly that he doesn't care for you in the same way that you care
No,
for
he
him. So
does. He
why waste
loves me.
energy?
You should see us when we're not. You don't see us when we're alone. When your observation isn't collapsing the quantum superposition of his dickishness, he's a doll. He's a wonderful guy.
Just having to think about this is really exhausting.
Do your friends ever say that? That would be cool if that came out of your friends' mouth. She's like, what?
I've had
It,
one person not quite saying that quantum stuff. No.
accusing you, blaming you for her boyfriend being a dick because your observation collapsed the quantum superposition of his dickishness.
Unfortunately, none of them have ever said that to me.
I should make that argument on my parking ticket in court. I'm gonna say, you know, you're the one who initiated this parking violation. It was your observation as a parking attendant that collapsed the quantum superposition of my tag's expiration date.
Your observation is wrong. Your observation of reality is wrong.
You collapsed the wrong reality.
Oh.
So, Greyel, let me ask you, when you wake up in the morning, do you wake up in the morning with your mind running, with your mind kind of empty, or something else?
The only thing that I think of when I wake up is why am I awake? To be honest with you.
How do you work a lot of
Okay,
hours?
Oh no, it's just I work. I have a very long commute, so I have to wake up like an extra hour earlier, to get to work.
Are you Asian
When
Pacific
do you wake
Islander? Do you
Yes, I am
self-ident-
Asian.
you self-identify as Asian Pacific Islander?
I am Asian. Yes.
There's the reason I ask is because there's something in your speech pattern that suggests it. There's a certain. It's not an accent, but it's. And you sound more Pacific Islander to me. The accent does.
Really.
Like Hawaii.
I'm East Asian. I mean, I've been to Hawaii.
There you go. I was right. See.
But I'm East Asian.
What's East Asian like? Like that?
China, Japan, and Korea.
Oh, okay.
Taiwan, I think, too.
You have a long commute, and you work in securities law, which means you fill out a lot of papers, or what? You like do a lot of
Yeah,
paperwork?
a lot of paperwork. Mostly paperwork.
I'll be right back, guys. I'm going to join in from my desktop.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Do you do you interact with other people much?
Not too much.
Does that bother you?
At first it did because I had been in this mode of I should always talk to people and interact with them. But nowadays I'm actually kind of comfortable not doing that.
How often do you hate me when you watch this show?
I don't really hate you that much. Occasionally I think, why can't he just kind of stay on topic and develop it a little more?
Okay. Well, see, because I think if you were ENTP, you'd probably hate me more.
Really?
Yeah, I think you're probably INTP. ENTPs don't get along with each other.
Oh, okay.
And ENTPs don't watch this show. Very few ENTPs. Tiffany here is an exception. In general, they'll have to be younger for sure. You know. Oh, I saved it. Actually, I saved the day. I gotta go let the dog in.
So I'm the only one here.
So I've got a lot of constitutional challenges in mind to the parking ticket, but the first thing I want to do is go in there and start filming, or try to film, and see what they say.
I think for the most part, film, right?
They'll let you film in court.
I think it depends on the court and the jurisdiction.
Okay, well, it shouldn't really, unless they have special cause. Like if in fact some witness protection program person were testifying in my parking ticket trial, then that'd be one thing. But there's no cause for them to try to curtail filming in this court case.
I think it's open to the public, but I mean, how are you going to sneak in a camera into the courthouse in the first place? Because you are not allowed to bring in a cell phone. Generally, you're not allowed to bring a cell phone with camera into the courthouse.
Why not?
Because the security will stop you, unless you're planning on sneaking it in.
No,
Which then somebody.
I'm not planning on sneaking it in. If that's where it gets, and then I'll have to figure out how much standing do I need, because if that's where it gets stopped, then I need to say, okay, do I have to have you guys arrest me first, or can I get standing just by the fact that you won't let me in with it? You know,
I can
because
see how this is a little too much waste of energy for a relatively simple thing.
it's not a waste of energy if I film the whole thing and make a bunch of Talking with Famous People episodes out of it. This is my bird holocaust theory.
The what?
The bird holocaust theory, killing two birds with one stone. The ideal world, I throw one stone and it kills every bird.
Yes, in an ideal world.
Yeah. So I try to maximize that vector when I do stuff. And if in fact I can film this whole proceeding and me running all sorts of constitutionality arguments in my parking ticket case, I think it might make a good video. I'm sure the judge would try to dismiss it, but I already have ATs to that stuff lined up. Did you do debate?
Oh yes.
I could tell when I said time starts now and you ran that time, bam. That's how I knew you were a debater.
You must be trained in there.
What kind of debate do you do?
I did Lincoln Douglas and alternative.
Alternative, I don't know what that is.
That's now I'm telling everybody my geographic location. That's in Virginia. It's only really in Virginia. It's a slower version. Like you talk slower than in the classic debates. I want to say it's been a while.
Oh, you don't know no spreading? It's like PF probably.
So I mean, you talk a little slower. You're allowed to talk a little slower, and I guess flesh out and require a little less evidence in lieu of arguments. So I think that's what it was.
It's public
It was
forum. That's what we call it now. We call it public forum. I think.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the same format. Your age, that makes sense. It was like right at the beginning of public forum.
Maybe I wouldn't know. I don't think we did public forum.
Right. Well, probably not, because public forum is like 50. No, it's probably 10, 12 years old at this point. So it would have been coming in right as you were leaving high school. If you're 30 now, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I didn't do LD in high school because it was still coming in when I was in high school, but I did policy.
Gotcha. Oh, policy. Yeah, it's a subset of policy. Alternative. That's what it was.
Oh, okay. So it's slow policy. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, no, that's not public forum then. Public forum's different, but it's weird. It's like probably a long round version of public forums. Public forum has the same rules, that it's supposed to be quality rather than quantity of arguments, and they curtail spreading and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
So, am I still recording this video? What's going on here? I'm totally
I
just
don't
spacing
know.
out and having a conversation. Yes, I'm recording. Okay, well, that's 39 minutes. Thanks for this particular episode of Talking with Famous People.